Another game of this titanic clash, Karpov-Korchnoi. It's Merano, 81, game 13. Korchnoi was trailing Karpov. He was losing badly, 4-1. But this game probably was his best achievement in the match, which was so difficult for him, and ended up with his eventual collapse, 6-2, and thus ended his hopes to overthrow Karpov. So c4, e6, knight c3, d5, and after bishop e7, Korchnoi switched to cd5, e5, bishop f4. Karpov developed the bishop on f5, g4, bishop f6, h3, knight f6, knight f3, castle, bishop d3, c5. Now, we discussed this position briefly in the introduction. So white made a very strange castle, walking with the king from e1 to g2. But king is quite safe, and white has slight pressure on the king side. But more important, white pieces are better positioned to control the center. So we could see that Korchnoi could manage to use these disadvantages by just doing some unconventional moves. So d takes c5, bishop c5, knight b5. I don't think Karpov at one point recognized all the potential dangers in this position, because now suddenly, if he can't play queen b6 because of bishop c7, and he's losing an exchange. So bishop has to go on f8, and then knight f goes on d4, and after exchange on c8, Korchnoi made a very strong move, e takes d4. So sounds a little bit strange. It's unconventional, because traditionally white always tried to use this square, this d4 square, as a stronghold for a knight. But Korchnoi recognized that having knight on d4 would not be enough to increase his advantage, while having pawn on d4 could offer him some more intriguing opportunities. His knight is well positioned. He's going to attack black's camp on c7. Also, having these pawns on d4 and d5, eventually it could limit black's options with the knight on f6 and a bishop on f6. Somehow white could play even f2, f3, taking control of e4 square, keeping an edge. Just look at the pieces. White knight is better positioned. White bishop on d3 is much better positioned than bishop on e6. White bishop on f4 is also playing more important role. So if white could actually manage to exchange queens, bring the rook into the game, then black will be in serious trouble. The only chance is slightly exposed position of white king, but it could be overcome. So Karpov played queen d7, and here, interestingly enough, Korchnoi again changing the course of the game. So he could of course come back with a knight on c3, or to continue the game as we just discussed, playing f2, f3. But he suddenly found a new interesting option. He played knight c7, rook c8, and took on e6. Looks illogical again. The bad passive bishop was eliminated for an exchange on a knight that could play a big role by attacking black's position from somewhere, c7 or d6. Also, white seems losing time and potentially strengthening black's pawn on d5. But again, it's a vital quality of a strong player to see how one advantage could be transposed to another one. And so Korchnoi was able to shift from one concept to another concept, because after f takes e6, rook e1, he just recognized that pawn on e6 is too weak, and in fact white is no longer trying to be defensive on the king side, but white is going to attack on the king side. So that wasn't quite an amazing deviation. So, and probably caught Karpov by surprise. a6, g5, knight e4, hoping just to sacrifice a pawn, but then creating counter chances, because a white king on g2 then will be exposed. But then queen g4. So suddenly, all white pieces are concentrated on the king side, and there's a threat f2, f3, and the pawn on e6 will be lost. Karpov desperately tried to create a counter chances. Bishop b4, rook e2, rook f8, and after f3, queen f7. but it seems to be inefficient. Bishop e2, bishop e5, knight d2, a3, knight takes f3. So Karpov is also trying very hard. So now, if taking on b4 would be met by knight e1 check. So Korchnoi had to control e1 square, and obviously move bishop g3 is coming in consideration immediately. And that was in fact the best move. That was the winning move, and now we'll see why. Because Korchnoi played g6, which was a mistake. But we can understand that both players were already in time trouble, definitely. Korchnoi, who was playing this creative game and probably overspent his time limits. But after g6, a6, bishop g3, that was Korchnoi's original idea. And it seems so logical that white just played g6, ruining black's position on the king's side. And what's the difference? Why the pawn on g5 is important? In fact, it was important. Karpov didn't find the only saving maneuver, which was knight h4 check, king h2, knight f3 check, king h1, and back on h4. So that was an amazing resource. And after queen takes h4, queen f3 check, rook g2, queen takes d3, a b4, rook f1 check, king h2, queen d1, white is forced to make a perpetual after queen d8, king h7, and queen h4 check. Now, what was the difference if Korchnoi eventually played bishop g3 at move 28? And the difference is that if black is trying to do the same, playing knight h4 check, king h2, knight f3 check, king h1, knight h4, then bishop takes h7. That's the move that we could make after g6. King takes h7, queen takes h4, king g6, and then rook f2, winning the piece. So again, a small nuance, probably not very logical, easy for computer to spot, because computer would not play g6. It doesn't play with a common sense. It sticks with calculation, and it could throw away a great game played by Viktor Korchnoi so far. But lucky for him, Karpov didn't find this nuance, which was not easy to find, let's admit. Played bishop e7, and after rook f2, the game was technically over. So there were a few more moves, but were absolutely irrelevant. So Korchnoi had an extra queen and easily converted it in the full point. Eventually, Karpov even lost the piece, so it was a very nice maneuver of Korchnoi. Just have a look again. Queen b3, queen goes on a6, then queen e8, and the knight on b2 was taken. That was Korchnoi's sealed move. The game was over, and the score changed in 4-2 in Karpov's favor. But that was the last achievement of Korchnoi in this match, and the end was all Karpov, who was winning great games in the Open Rio Lopez and scoring an impressive 6-2 victory and winning this match and keeping his title for another 4 years.